Have you ever noticed that sometimes it's not the big memories that hurt the most after losing a pet, but it's the small ones? The quiet moments, the routines, the things that you didn't even realize mattered until they were gone. In one moment you feel okay, and the next something small hits you, and it feels like you're right back in the middle of your grief. So if you've experienced that, I want you to know that there's a reason for it. And today I'm going to help you understand why. So welcome back to Next Level Pets, your home for living the best life you can with your pets, and also learning how to heal with purpose after they've left our lives. If you have ever loved an animal with your whole heart, then you truly belong here. And I hope you don't mind my casual attire for today. I just finished a one-on-one session on Zoom, and I just didn't feel like changing into, the dress shirts that I normally wear in my videos. Now, if this video does resonate with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe and, hopefully leave a comment. It helps these messages reach more people who are going through this and need to hear that they're not alone. For me, it wasn't always the big memories of my cat Dublin that hit the hardest. A lot of times it was just the small moments, opening the door and expecting to see him. The stillness in my apartment after he was gone. It's the absence of something I didn't even realize had become a part of me and something that I depended on. I remember how, whenever I was about to go to sleep, Dublin would crawl, on my chest and settle there, just looking at me with those half-closed, peaceful eyes, the cat smile. And for part of his life, he was also an indoor-outdoor cat. And I used to leave the window open just enough for him to squeeze through. And he wasn't a small cat by any stretch. He was a Manx, if you're familiar with that breed. They're kind of big boys with a little bobtail. And sometimes he would come flying through that window, like with the cold night air still in his fur, just completely alert as like, he had just escaped some kind of nighttime adventure and had barely made it back to home base on time, And those moments didn't seem like much at the time, but they became to mean everything. What I came to understand and what I really wish someone had explained to me a lot earlier is that this experience is not random. And there's actually a reason why certain memories just hit us so much harder than others. And it has a lot to do with how our brains build connection. Our brains are constantly creating patterns in our lives. They're mapping out our daily lives, what we do, when we do it, who we do it with, who we interact with, and how these moments feel. Also, you can watch another video I did where I talk more about what happens in the brain during grief, more about actual neural mapping and attachment. But anyways, because when you have a pet, they become part of that map in a very deep and consistent way. They're just not part of the big moments. They're part of the everyday. They're there when you wake up. They're there when you come home. They're there in the quiet moments that nobody else sees. And because those moments happen over and over again, your brain starts to expect them. It builds a rhythm around their presence. So when they're gone, it's not just that you miss them emotionally, it's that your brain is literally still expecting them to be there. And that's where those sudden waves come from. You might just be doing something completely normal in your day, walking into a room, reaching for something, just sitting down at, when you get home at night and suddenly something feels off, something is missing. And that's because your brain is recognizing a pattern that used to include them. But it doesn't anymore. And your brain isn't, trying to hurt you. It's just trying to hold on to something that mattered and that had been a established pattern in your life. Another important part of this is that the small moments, the ones that seem insignificant at the time, are actually the ones that we repeat the most. We might only have a few big standout memories when we first got our pet, when we lost our pet, But those quiet everyday interactions, those happen hundreds, maybe thousands of times. And because of that repetition, they become deeply embedded in us. They're not just memories. They become part of how we experience life itself. They become the fabric of our life. So when those moments disappear or change, it can feel intense and completely, full of surprise. Sometimes even more intense than the bigger memories that, we hold on to. And then there's something else happening. When a memory comes up, it's not just the image or the thought, it's the feeling that comes with it. And your brain doesn't just remember your pet, nor does it really understand how to discern between the feeling and the memory. It remembers what it felt like to be with them, the comfort, the routine, the connection. So when that memory appears, your brain is almost trying to recreate that experience and look for it and have it. It at the same time, it recognizes that the experience isn't there anymore. And that contrast, that gap between what was and what is, that's what creates the emotional surge. That's why grief can feel so just unpredictable. And if this has happened to you, you're not going backwards in your healing. You're just processing love. Those small moments that hurt the most are actually the moments that mattered the most, because they were real, they were consistent, and they were full of connection. So when a memory does come up, instead of pushing it away, try this. Just pause, feel it, and remind yourself, this hurts because it mattered. One assignment that I give to people in my Forever in Our Hearts healing program is what something I call the golden list. And this is a list of, 2, 3, 5, 10 memories, whatever works for you, big or small, that bring you joy and remind you of the love, laughter, and unique experiences you shared with your pet. I encourage people just to write it down and hold on to this list. So when you find yourself in a strong moment of grief, you go back to that list, you read over it. You reconnect with those memories intentionally. You begin to shift your emotional state back from loss, back into love. And over time, you can, begin to create new emotional patterns, new maps of gratitude, love, and appreciation. You can kind of repave over that grief, instead of only reinforcing the pain. Grief doesn't come from the moment that you lost them. It comes from all the moments you shared. The small moments are where love lives. And even though they do hurt, they're also proof of something beautiful that you experienced. So if you feel comfortable, please tell me one small moment you remember with your pet. Those are often the ones that stay with us the longest. And again, please like and subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.